Hello and welcome to ATARC's webinar series. Today, topic experts will discuss innovative solutions and strategic approaches to overcoming obstacles and providing valuable insights into the latest trends and best practices in cybersecurity, specifically tailored to the needs and challenges of government agencies. My name is Kirsten Kotsaruba, and I have the pleasure of moderating today's panel. ATARC stands for the Advanced Technology Academic Research Center. ATARC is an organization that facilitates collaboration between government, industry, and academia in order to accelerate technology modernization initiatives. We provide ongoing opportunities for cross-agency collaboration through on-site interaction, learning, and market research. I would like to welcome all of our attendees here today, and a special thanks to Molly Frampton, Ted Roosh, Mike Townsend, and the entire Invicti team. This afternoon, we're going to hear from our panelists, and we will pop in a few poll questions. So be sure to respond to the polls in order to receive your CPE credit. Now, with that all said, I'd love to welcome all of our panelists on camera. Looks like they're all here. Nice to see you guys. And we're going to begin with a round of really quick introductions. So Alan, if you could kick us off, please.
Sure, thank you. I'm Alan Hill. I'm the Chief Information Officer at the Federal Communications Commission. I love this topic today. I think it's a challenge and an opportunity for growth for all agencies in this space. I've been here since August of 2022. It's been great, made a lot of improvements and a full opportunity of field of greens to find more things to do to improve how we deliver services to our customers and to the public. And thank you very much.
Thank you. Let's go to Frank Indiviglio next.
Sure. Thanks for having me. I'm Frank Indiviglio. I'm the Chief Technology Officer at NOAA. And we have a pretty interesting mission space. It's from the surface of the sun to the bottom of the ocean. There's a lot of really good science that happens there and a lot of really interesting technology that supports that science. But a lot of security challenges to keep all that infrastructure running securely. So this topic obviously is a lot of interest to us and in delivering our products and services to the public and all our stakeholders. So really excited to talk about it, and thank you for having me.
Thank you. And over to Sherry next.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. Sherry Thomas, I'm the Cyber Technology Officer for United States Marine Corps Forces Cyberspace Command. So everything in the cyber realm, to include hardware and software, and protecting all the marine cyber terrain. Joint Force Headquarters, Doden from the Marine Corps side. So excited to speak on this topic in terms of how it proliferates across the terrain. Over.
Thank you. And James?
Hi, good afternoon. James Scobie. I'm the Chief Information Security Officer for the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission. Excited to participate in this panel. Appreciate ATARC hosting it and looking forward to a great conversation with the other panelists here.
Thank you. Jonathan?
Good afternoon, Jonathan White from the Coast Guard. I am the Cloud and Data Branch Chief for the Coast Guard. I'm leading our efforts to get us into commercial cloud environments and use the Coast Guard data for decisions and mission excellence.
Thank you. And Tony?
Glad to be here. It sounds like a great opportunity to talk with some great colleagues about a great topic of significant importance. So good opportunity to provide urgency. Of course, I'm the Department of Navy Chief Information Security Officer. So it's really a very diverse portfolio that is under persistent threat from our adversaries. So in order to deliver the mission, we're dependent on to deliver a strong cybersecurity posture. So glad for ATARC to sponsor this.
Thank you. And let's go to Julian next.
Good afternoon, Julian Breyer. I'm the Chief Engineer for Zero Trust and for the Thunderdome effort at DISA, at the Defense Information Security Agency. We too have a pretty interesting mission space within the DoD in that we're both a consumer of the services I provide as an application owner of over 1,200 applications, but then we're also the transport provider for much of the Department of Defense. So we're both a service provider to the greater department and a service consumer of our own services that we then offer to our customers. So Zero Trust is super important for us. I've been living many of the challenges we're going to talk about here today on a day-to-day basis, and I'm very excited to talk to my colleagues and to all of you about the challenges and opportunities we've encountered here.
Thank you. And let's go to Roy next.
Hi, I'm Roy Luongo, currently the CISO at Secret Service. Our mission, obviously, we have the protective responsibilities, but we also have huge criminal investigatory and financial digital crime responsibilities. So these things really get at the heat of what we're doing. So us doing it safely while realizing how other people may be taking advantage of vulnerabilities elsewhere, it's really important to us. So thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you. And then Frank with Invicti.
Hello. My name is Frank Tucci. I am the CTO and head of security research here at Invicti Security. I've been in the application security space primarily for close to 20 years. At this point, I look through things like zero trust and initiatives like this, and having the opportunity to discuss this in a panel format with the folks that are here is much appreciated. And looking forward to diving into some of the details and challenges that we all face in the day-to-day scenarios where we're all under attack almost constantly. So thank you for that, and looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you. And before we dive into our first question, I do want to call for our first poll. So for our audience at home, be sure to respond to the first poll. It is up on the screen now. Thank you. All right, so just to set the stage, I want to discuss some of the common challenges that are encountered in advancing application security programs across the industry. So I'm going to call on just a few of our panelists to kind of share with us one of the more common ones that they've seen. And I'll try to give, a different answer here. But Sherry, do you think you could kick us off with the most common challenge you've encountered in this space?
Yes, absolutely. So the common challenges are basically keeping pace with the threat, as was mentioned previously from one of the panel speakers. The threat is ever evolving, ever changing. Being able to keep a pace with that is because we need to be able to do it in minutes and seconds versus days or weeks or months as we used to previously. So the ability to react quickly. The ability to react to change is particularly important, to recognize that change and how much it proliferates into the environment. And what I mean by that is, what are those second and third order effects on the network, right? So for example, it could be an endpoint, but then how far does it reach in terms of lateral movement? And then we have to start looking at what can be changed or mitigated in terms of brownfield approaches versus you need to wholesale change something, and that could take quite a bit of time. So cordoning off the network appropriately to make appropriate decisions. Thank you.
Thank you. Roy, I'd love to hear from you next if you could share another common challenge that you've encountered.
Yeah, I think the one I see is we get more into the granularity, the atomic level of applications, right? When we build it in-house, we can use all the pretty terms like secure by design, and we can really see what we're putting in there. But when we get into third-party or software, we're really passing trust back, and we have to understand what they're putting in there. So, the S bombs, the H bombs, we're probably going to need AI bombs in the future because we have to know what people are doing in these applications by reusing software elsewhere. I think the biggest challenge is to understand what that is and how many magnitudes back we can actually pay attention to in a coherent manner. And then, I'll say weaponize that for our use to secure applications during development as well as during operations.
Thank you, Roy. And Frank Catucci, I'd love to hear your industry perspective on this question.
Yeah, what I see is pretty much kind of two different facets of common challenges. One is on the people side and one is on the technical side. I think from a people perspective, it's too easy not to recognize that we always have some type of resource issue, right? We always want more resources. We always want more people and more experts to achieve our common goal of being more secure. The other people part of that to me would be culture change, right? So there's a lot of folks who've been doing these things for many years in certain ways, and we introduce these new technologies or new practices that are encompassed in zero trust and other things. And that's really a challenge there. So resources and culture shift and just fostering the right environment for success. On the technical side of things, I think what was mentioned earlier is definitely a key part of that, right? We look at the inventories, we look at what we have to know. we look at trying to get a good grasp on all of our APIs, all of our applications, knowing exactly what composes those applications. And so we have so many different moving parts there when you look at a traditional or a common application or an API to say, how am I inventorying these? How am I inventorying the pieces of these applications? What are they talking to? What can they talk to? What rights do they have, et cetera? So there are a lot of different type of areas that can be areas of concentration that I see it being, common challenges, if you will. And that's without even going into things like more advanced orchestration or automation. And that ties a little bit back to the people and resources side. But those I would say are the most common reoccurring themes that I'm seeing across various industries, especially in this sector.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And for the other panelists online or for anybody who's attending virtually, you guys can utilize the chat, maybe respond to some of these answers that we've heard so far, if it resonates with you, or if there are other common challenges that you've been experiencing. I think that might be interesting to see. So you can always use the chat option or use the Q&A if you're at home. So thank you for that. Appreciate you guys setting the stage there. Frank Indiviglio, I want to start with you on my next question, which is, how might the addition of new pillars such as visibility and analytics, automation and orchestration, and governance within a zero trust strategy framework affect organizations in terms of their cybersecurity posture and their operational efficiency?
It's a great question. So I think those new pillars, right, that you're talking about would have really good effects, right? I think automation and orchestration, and kind of along the lines what Frank was talking about just a second ago, are really powerful tools, right? They allow you to better maybe control your potential attack surfaces. You understand your infrastructure better, but it offers a ability to simplify a little bit your infrastructure so that folks can then focus on the really important tasks they have to do, right? If they move from maintenance to mission, or that's how I like to say it anyway, and they're really focused on the things that matter the most. Now, and I think the automation part gives you the visibility and analytics, right? You can build that into your orchestration and automation. And then governance, I think I view it a little separately, right? But I think it has to evolve, especially when you're moving from like big paradigms in security or any technology. The governance has to mature, and it has to mature together, right? Everybody's got to work on this together. The same thing, like I think it parallels a little bit with AI, right? Governance and AI is going to pull in other folks. Governance and security is going to pull in other disciplines, right? Whether it be systems, security, obviously, but there's legal, there's other things, and especially when you tie AI to it now, we have to add that complexity and that governance. So I think overall, it's going to really improve that security posture and give us more operational efficiency. I think the potential downside, but it's not really a downside, but something to prepare for, is it requires new skills, right? Whether they be technical, as we're freeing folks up to focus on the right things, the skills change from maintenance to maybe programming, or however you want to encapsulate that. But they'll also include other disciplines, whether they be legal or ethical or whatever that may be. But you're going to have to start building those skills, and they won't all be technical. We'll have to get them to all work together. So I think those new pillars will overall be a great addition, but we have to just manage the change.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Tony, what are some of your thoughts around this question?
Yeah, I think it's definitely a plus, right? It's all about understanding your environment, knowing where the assets are, what the status of the assets are. So when you talk about improved visibility, it's a must-do continuous for us to try to modernize our architecture and to increase that visibility, which couples with zero trust of understanding how do we ensure only the right folks access our networks at the right times, accessing the right data. So it gets down to that word data. So from us, creating that data-driven advantage. And so I look at that from a perspective of being able to manage, see what's going on with the network, the status of the network, and being able to operationalize our changes that we try to effect. So that also means, as we look at cybersecurity, it is all about, the threat, the ability to access vulnerabilities, the ability to exploit. So it's more than just the vulnerabilities itself. So I think we're coupling that with our aspect of moving to zero trust, and creating this type of orchestration and visibility is definitely moving in the right direction.
Thank you. Sherry, would you like to add to this question as well?
Yes, absolutely. So from our lens, we have something called the Marine Corps Enterprise Network, and we're unifying that network into one single network. Yeah, so basically it's the ability to find anomalies quicker, portion off certain areas of the network for remediation, using artificial intelligence and machine learning, talked about earlier, right? So when a security incident happens, what is the event management, and then security orchestration and response. So got to be able to do all of that. And as previously talked about, right, we need to be able to log a lot of traffic, all the traffic as much as possible. We need to figure out user and entity behavior, do some predictive analysis, and forecast in terms of what that behavior is looking like, and then avoid lateral movement as much as possible on the network. So those are the network configurations that need to be in place, and as mentioned previously as well, right? Because data is the crux of the whole issue, we need to make sure the data is accessed by the right individual at the right place at the right time, whether it be an individual or a machine, that they don't have adversary effects on any of that. And then there has to be a cultural shift, right? So we have to look at the people, the process, and the technology. So the people have to be more data literate and more aware of the cyber hygiene and the cyber environment. And they have to have the processes built in terms of what are those effects, or what are those things that need to happen after a security incident happens. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to call for poll question number 2, but in the meantime, if our panelists want to look over at the Q&A, I think we might have time for one audience question here. So folks at home, respond to poll question number 2. And as for our panel, if anyone feels so inclined as to respond to Fenn's question, we can go with Fenn's question first. Given increasing remote work and the NIST SP 1800-22, the mobile device security BYOD, do you see a path forward to loosening these BYOD restrictions while maintaining or increasing secure zero trust architecture authorizations? So this is kind of, we didn't discuss this question ahead of time, but if you want to jump in, we have a little bit of time to answer this one.
Sure, I'll take a swing at that one. So I think there's both promise and risk associated with moving to more BYOD, even under the zero trust framework. And I think the promise there is obvious. It's something that we've been trying as the FSEB and the federal government for a number of years to achieve. I think zero trust, particularly with its focus on strong authorization as the foundation for interactions, offers some tools to do that. I think security practitioners and organizations have to be very careful about limiting the defense in depth that they offer whenever they move to BYOD. And there's been some vulnerabilities in headlines lately that kind of illustrate where those things might go off the rails. So I don't think there's a panacea here. I think we still have to be very careful about where we've got redundant controls layered to make sure, because we don't have control of the endpoint, where are we getting a second chance to catch bad people doing bad things?
Thank you. We have time for one more response if anyone else would like to add anything else. Julian?
Yeah, sure. Happy to jump in. So on the DoD side, I think we see a lot of benefit to permitting BYOD. I think right now we're leaning more towards broader use of BYOAD, where we get some control or at least some insight into the mobile device from which our users are accessing our networks. But we realize that there are situations in which it's beneficial and desirable for people to be able to access some of our services from non-government devices. And so we're looking at things like VDI to enable that for traditional devices, maybe less so for mobile devices, and to figure out protection so we can limit information exposure to mobile devices or to even traditional laptops for other use cases. So we're definitely looking at that. I see a path forward if we can figure out the security and make sure that we don't expose information that can then be shared or retained on those devices unnecessarily.
Excellent. Thank you. Okay, moving right along then. Alan, I want to start with you for our next question. What are the key challenges faced by government IT departments in updating their cybersecurity strategies to address sophisticated cyber threats? So maybe if you could list off just one or two here.
Ooh, that's not fair, just two. I'll start with the technology readiness. That's probably the most difficult thing. And it's not just from the old technology, even today's technology being ready for IPv6, right? It's you can't advance security if you don't have your network where it needs to be. The other one is always the favorite topic of every agent, budget. It's that. So how do you build that digital plan that allows you to put a pathway of modernization and bring in better sophisticated technologies to do the security threat, to deal with security threats? I look at it differently, and then CISOs might run off and say, talk to their CIOs on this. I'm taking a different approach in how we're addressing the security threats. I'd like what Sherry said about we just can't stay up with the patching aspect of things. So we need to build the networks in such a fashion that allows us to be predictive and preemptive, vice reactive. And so in doing so, bringing together the picture of what's going on, I'm a believer of full stack visibility, that observability to see down to the code level, because patches aren't released on times of vulnerability. Vulnerabilities, once they are discovered, it takes time for the OEMs to patch. So we got to get to a state to where we have security zones in place, knowing when to data that intelligence, when they're going out of that, seeing bad behavior and things like that, because it's not just an external threat, it's an internal threat. And that's important. And so one of the things I did is I've taken the network team, because the way networks are built today, it's important to recognize the change of traditional IP to where we now have software-defined perimeters, software-defined networking. We have micro-segmentation needs. So I put the network team under the CISO team because it needs to be holistic in how it's built out. And the first response, you don't have time for changes to take place because you're transferring tickets from operations, from security to operations. So it needs to be a lot more real time. In addition, you got to be able to have a predictive way of seeing what's going out there on the network. We can't wait for patches. The threat today, you think about it from the perspective of how fast things get done, just like ChatGPT. You can sit there, what used to take, hours or you can do in seconds. And so that's the threat to us now. We have to plan for the future in that regards.
Thank you, Alan. James, are there any other additional key challenges that maybe Alan didn't mention, or anything you want to just reiterate?
Sure, I'll add, and I think this is related to some of the points Alan brought up, but lack of standardization, I think, is one here. The more diverse an environment is, the more difficult it is to defend. A lot of us have spent the last few years doing cloud rationalization and moving to public and private clouds. That offered a chance to do some of the normalization between these environments, but a lot of organizations took a lift and shift approach instead of doing the hard work of application rationalization. There's a fundamental difference in the way private enterprises that are managing a P&L and CIOs and CISOs in the federal sector have to approach this change just by the nature of their organizations. And enforcing standardization in public sector organizations, I think, is harder in a lot of ways. But I think it's critical that federal agencies focus on that to be able to wrap these standards to make their environments easier to defend.
Thank you, James. And Julian, did you want to add anything else to this question?
Yeah, I would maybe just foot stomp what's been said previously. In many instances, we too have taken a lift and shift approach, and so we've preserved the tech that we had previously, and are asking a lot of our application owners to additionally invest in better application security. Often they don't really know what application security is applicable to their environment. So it just turns into, or what used to be a big task to begin with, and to modernize these applications and implement better security now has become a monumental task for them. So I think there's a challenge for us to provide some assistance with some of these modernizations and to implement some security in front of the applications, while simultaneously working with application owners to get a better understanding of what they've got out there, how those applications can be modernized, and how we can get to a place where we've got both some of the old defensive depth that I know has been given a death sentence by many people, but then also kind of the microsegmentation. So we're not undoing the protections we've established at the perimeter necessarily, but we're using those as additive security in front of the now hopefully hardening applications with microperimeters and API security and things like that. The second piece that I just want to point out is that we found that there's both a benefit and a challenge in the additional telemetry we're getting out of all of these solutions. It's obviously fantastic that we've got all of this API first design, so we can react more quickly to threads, and we get much better telemetry, so we can find threads more quickly, or misconfigurations, or other reasons why our networks aren't working well, or applications. But it's also a challenge in that now we've got an even bigger deluge of data coming towards our cyber defender and our network operators. And so we have to get much better at prioritizing the data we're exposing to them, or it'll just become inoperable or impossible for them to make sense of the telemetry we're providing to them. So a lot of work has to be done kind of in better analytics and using ML to surface anomalies rather than just presenting more data to the analysts.
Thank you, Julian. Now, Tony, I want to ask, how do evolving technologies and new vulnerabilities impact the development of cybersecurity strategies in government sectors?
Yeah, we have to take a holistic approach when we're looking at everything. I like to talk about the vulnerabilities first, which kind of been talked about a lot when we talk about expanding attack surfaces, being able to get at what are the priority vulnerabilities that need to be mitigated, what are the threats associated, so you can have a priority mitigation strategy. So as we've continued, at least in the Department of Navy, we've always dealt with ashore, afloat. We have enterprise weapon systems. We're also, we have transitioned to the cloud. So of course we have a cloud and on-prem, but we're also giving more emphasis to IoT and facility related control systems. So that attack surface, demands that we be looking across that diverse portfolio and how we are managing things. But it also demands that we must have that data, and as I believe Alan would say, that looking at what is that telemetry we need from that environment, and how do we also build those requirements into new systems so they're born cyber secure and they're providing the telemetry needed to better defend. So those are kind of part of our holistic strategies to start putting more and more emphasis on how we bake in those requirements into new systems, how we modernize and equip legacy and older systems. And then we have to look at when we talk about a flow, we have to look at our DDoS environment, our denied disruptive, intermittent and low bandwidth environments. And then that becomes all about that response of, once you're doing that, the strategies have changed. We have to incorporate as much as we can of artificial intelligence and machine learning, because we have to make use of that data and information that was mentioned earlier and how we prioritize and what we look at. But we also must make the best of AI, because the adversary is doing it to make the best of AI, and they're not bound by policy, funding, or by the clock. So we are always looking at taking all of these newer technologies, scraping the data that we need, and being able to prioritize our mitigation strategies and create better visibility.
Thank you. Frank Catucci, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, that was a great answer, right? And the holistic kind of approach to that is exactly what I would agree on. When we look at if we take example of the pillar of visibility and analytics, that's one I always like to start on for this, because without that visibility, you may not know that you're facing a new or sophisticated type of attack, right? Are you looking at the right traffic? Are you looking at the right data that's being accessed? Are all the event management systems in place to detect those new type of attacks, or the types of attacks evolve and get more sophisticated each day. And with that, you really need that visibility and analytics. So it comes down to the multi-tier piece as well. And just like the holistic approach, right? First, you need to have the accurate inventory and knowing what you're trying to secure. Then you need to also be able to make sure that the information that you have that may represent an attack or something of that nature is accurate also, and it's being covered. So if we look at making sure that we have those things in place, that's the kind of foundation that we look at. Now, when we ask about, new vulnerabilities or evolving technologies, the other piece is AI, right? So as stated, attackers are using AI for the negative. We need to make sure that we're using AI on the positive and defensive fronts. The other piece of AI is that AI is generating code much quicker for everybody who's using assistance, right? So I know that there are regulations in place and things like that for using assistance in various areas, but inevitably code assistance is going to be used more and more. And with that, more lines of code are being written faster. As more lines of code are written faster and deployed faster, you're also going to have inherent bugs and inherent libraries and things that are used that have those nested vulnerabilities. So understanding that. The last piece I want to touch on is really, the automation and the ability to react. So do you have everything in place to make sure that you are reacting to any type of attack in the proper fashion? Have you done the proper amount of threat modeling? Have you indicated that we have these new types of attacks or new angles of attacks in your threat models? Are the threat models being updated as the codes and APIs are being updated? So the threat model piece of that also plays in very strongly, I would say. And that's often a piece that is tough to do if you're starting from a scale in which you don't have a real mature threat modeling piece in process already. And we know that we can't really automate that as much as we would like. So the threat modeling there would be inherent to make sure that your apps are more secure and being updated. The threat models are being updated as new technologies and new types of attacks are being developed.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. All right. So for my next question, I want to start with Jonathan first, please. And that question is, in what ways does the zero trust architecture address the unique cybersecurity needs of government agencies? So what are its potential limitations? And if you could include the context of managing legacy systems.
Yes, the government is entrusted with protecting a lot of personally identifiable information about critical infrastructure, other sensitive data that we might be holding to, including business sensitive information, intelligence data. The government has it all. And especially in a service like the Coast Guard, where we have 11 statutory missions that cover the gambit between DoD all the way to search and rescue and safety of life at sea. That information is incredibly difficult to properly categorize and protect, especially if you use broad approaches that were used in the past. And so what Zero Trust allows us to do is really focus in on what exactly is that information? What do I need to be concerned about protecting, and what is actually not a sensitive piece of information? A lot of discussion earlier about using tools to be able to comb through all the information and do some analysis on that is incredibly important in this journey. And we need to look to not only classify the information, but then tie that back into our identity management tooling, and provide that on-demand access and security controls. So our focus is on those shared enterprise-grade identity solutions and on the enterprise-grade data discovery solutions. Those are our two primary focuses right now in the Coast Guard to get us started in the Zero Trust journey. And we want to, from a legacy systems perspective, we want to remove the burden that we placed on all of these legacy systems to solve those security problems at each application. That when I think legacy system, that's basically what I think of. I think of something that has brought the entire stack to the table, and they're responsible for maintaining that stack for good or for bad. And in the zero trust world, I want to strip all that away, provide that as an enterprise service, and then the application owner can focus their modernization effort on what makes that application special for the end user, instead of focusing on building in all of these basic security controls that really should be provided from an infrastructure standpoint. And lastly, I wanted to mention that when we deal with external users, people outside of the government, delivering zero trust is incredibly difficult. First, we have to be able to understand that user, be able to trust that user, put them into some level of access category, provision their access, and then maintain that access. We take for granted internal to the government, we have common access cards, PIV cards, and there's a whole structure associated with delivering that access tool, that multi-factor tool to that end user. That doesn't necessarily take place with external users, but in order to deliver those services, we need to be able to form a trust relationship with that person. So that's something we're discovering right now as we look to add zero trust authentication options to a lot of our applications that are accessible externally.
Thank you, Jonathan. And Frank, would you like to respond to this question as well?
Sure. Yeah, no, I think there's it really I think it's going to start helping government agencies in a way. It changes the thinking of security, right? Before it was, what are we going to block? What do we have to block? Now it's, what are we going to allow, right? I think that gives you a better mindset to really service your stakeholders, have better control over your environment, and really kind of move, kind of what Jonathan was talking about, right? Move to a more complicated operating dimension, I guess. A lot of, and I'm sure there's parallels here with a bunch of folks on the panel, right? Or with the introduction of cloud and everything else, our systems are getting more complicated, right? They get stretched across boundaries. Maybe sometimes they're for us, it could be field systems, or if you want to call edge, right? All that that adds complexity, and before they were managed kind of in stovepipes, and now we can manage them across the enterprise and really kind of track the data, like everyone else has been saying, across those systems, and really give it a better platform to operate on, and give us a better way to manage all those platforms that we operate on. In terms of limitations, there's technical work that has to go into legacy applications, but I think the real challenge, it's not so much a limitation, but it's something that we'll have to work through, and it's more of a people challenge, right? We all work in or run really complicated enterprises that have lots of applications and lots of systems, and bringing those folks together and getting them, going in the right direction. That is work, and there is technical work, but again, it's more of a people process rather than a technical process, and one that, again, we can build on for governance and other things, but I think that's going to be the biggest challenge or limitation there.
Absolutely. Thank you. And Alan, would you like to add anything else to this question?
Why not? So take it from the perspective of really what we're getting out of zero trust. It's a journey for us. We're going to continue to be on that. So it enhances our security posture. It's the never trust, always verify. It helps us minimize our attack service, least privilege access. And then from the perspective of it improves our data protection, right? It really helps us from a data-centric security perspective. That's key to us to be able to move forward. And more important to the future threats, it gives us a ability to adapt to modern threats. It helps us have a more dynamic security posture control in doing such. That's key. The flip side of the limitation aspect of things, legacy systems. You can't, if you still can't get out of your old systems and stuff, that's a challenge. So there's going to be compatibility issues with what the intent of zero trust does. The ability to put those granular controls in place is imperative, because we got to get beyond. We got to have our data built with the security and intelligence in it. so that we know when it's normal or abnormal behavior. We'll be able to do that. Our favorite topic of every day is resource constraints, budget type things, just the cost of moving something from legacy. You know, if you have a bunch of mainframes and getting that out is just a challenge, right? And then potential operational disruption, right?
Uh-oh, I think we lost Alan.
And then the fun side of the CIO is that part of the political savviness, the cultural change, the resistance to that, being able to work through that aspect, and even our skills gaps, right? We have in our organization, there's just not enough, not just with the government, but just industry that have those sophisticated skills that, because technology has advanced so fast. If you take a traditional network person and you take a software developer, now you need them to be together to do software-defined networking because they're coded in Python and it's not a traditional way of IP routing and stuff. And so it changes things. So that's much more complex. And guess what? That person that you used to get for, you know, $100,000 now costs $300,000 because they're so in demand. And we're competing with the big guys that are delivering the cloud services that are providing those type of capabilities.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. All right, I'm going to call for poll question number 3 here. So for our audience at home, the poll question number 3 is up on the screen. And Roy, we are ready to hear from you again, sir. So my next question, if you could kick us off, is how can a comprehensive approach to cybersecurity, incorporating policy, training, stakeholder collaboration, really enhance the effectiveness of defense strategies against multifaceted cyber threats in government agencies?
Yeah, no, great. And I think it's a great question because it plays off the previous answers, right? You know, we all know that we are all humans and we love humans, but humans are a huge vector for adversaries to get in and take advantage of us, right? So what we do, we use technology if we can, but we also use policy to tell people what to do and what not to do, right? Well, humans don't like to be told what to do and not to do. But we use the policy. So the way we have to do it is through training, not only tell them what we need them to do, but tell them why we need them to do it that way. And through the use of training, we can enforce why the policy is important and hopefully bring the stakeholders and the users, you know, into that, you know, air quote, you know, cybersecurity culture, right? No matter what we do in cybersecurity, there's usually some cost, whether it's outright it impacts ops, or it's an inconvenience to ops, or it just messes with the user experience. So we have to use training not just to tell them what that is, but to why it's important that they adopt it and buy into that. So that's how I think that works. Yep.
Yeah, thank you. Frank Indiviglio, would you like to add anything to that question?
Sure. I guess I think what I'm going to say is tied to what Alan and what we're talking about, but it's a journey, right? Any kind of shift in technology, it's not about the destination, it's about how you get there. And we all have to get there together, right? So, I mean, the way I look at it is we start off with everybody gets a seat at the table as we start moving through that. I mean, security, that means stakeholders, that means everyone's there. But also, you know, and training is important, policy obviously, but then integrating those different types of stakeholders over time through either events, training, and make sure that we have multidisciplinary training. Like we'll do things like hackathons, and we'll include security teams in there to promote things like DevSecOps or why security matters in software development or your application in general. But really, you have to put those folks together and get them moving in the same direction. And if they're giving them a common language, right, which takes time, but getting them all together and using policy and things like that, training to get that to that common language, so they were all kind of equal at the table, so that we're all implementing security. We're not all trying to train people to do security or instill other things into what their day-to-day jobs, but it's part of our day-to-day jobs.
Absolutely, thank you. And Tony, would you like to add anything else?
I think, yeah, again, I think it kind of goes right back to, like you said, approach it from a holistic perspective. You know, we have been trying to transform how we have implemented cybersecurity and we call that, I guess, in the Department of Navy, cyber ready. And it's just the recognition that, you know, we have a lot of security requirements and we try to comply and meet all of them, but we need to be more rooted in a philosophy of readiness. So I've talked about that, you know, earlier in a couple other forums. So a big part of that is what's been mentioned earlier is getting away from being able to change culture. So we're shifting our approach to more of a cyber readiness, which accounts for those policy, people, as we talked about earlier, in technology. And we've established, you know, a strategy that goes into how we assess security, how we assess vulnerabilities, how we do it in a standardized way. We are looking at very closely of how we need to implement continuous monitoring. So we have that telemetry and that awareness of what's going on in the network. And then we're also talking, a big part of that is how we can add more and more adversarial assessment testing to our standard operations. So we got to get away from a periodic snapshot to understanding as much as possible what's going on in the network. But a big part of that also, equally, as I mentioned earlier, is building in requirements early into the new systems we're bringing on board. And there's a big recognition as we make all these changes, we're going to have to retool our workforce, not only on the change, but to make sure they have the skills that are necessary. So looking at the strategy we're working through, we think that's helping us to go at the essence of this question of how do we do it in a holistic fashion.
Thank you, Tony. Now, Jonathan, if you could please share with us what innovative solutions and strategic approaches are being discussed to overcome the obstacles faced by government agencies when it comes to implementing zero trust architectures and adhering to regulatory and compliance standards.
Yeah, so my primary role is implementing new solutions, and I'm certainly on the technical implementation side. But I spent 2 years in Coast Guard Cyber Command on the operations side as well, so I fully understand the challenges that we encounter when doing this work. Like I said earlier, the primary thing we're trying to implement right now is a modernization of our ICAM solution space. If we don't get ICAM right, if we don't get user authentication right, we can't go anywhere else. That's really your starting point when it comes to zero trust. And if you don't have the right tools in place and you're not unifying your user records and fully understanding what people have access to, you really can't get anywhere else. The second pillar we're really focused on is device security. You know, certainly in the DoD, you know, you see a lot of complaints out there from users saying that their devices are crippled by endpoint monitoring services. That's a true statement. And honestly, simplifying the device security app architecture is a prime concern for the Coast Guard. We want to unify our solutions. We want to use best of breed tools, make them cloud-based. We don't want to own the infrastructure required to link all these things together. Which then opens the door for us to leverage AI and shared data approaches where we can look at what's happening around the world and apply those lessons learned almost immediately into our own environment as well. Enabling remote access solutions has been a huge win for us. We just unveiled our cloud-based virtual desktop solution, Manta Virtual Desktop. We have over 6,000 people using that, where previously we only had about 1,000 people using our on-prem virtual desktop solution. So that six-fold increase of people using a secure desktop solution has dramatically improved our ability to provide access in a zero trust way, at least from a desktop perspective, to provide access to our network tools and our mission services. The other aspect that we're focused on is leveraging industry for managed IT services. We contracted out for a managed IT partner. They are helping us accelerate our zero trust maturation. And really that's about doing it across all pillars simultaneously. We want to be able to look holistically at the solution space and not go tool by tool by tool. All of these things need to be coordinated amongst each other. And if you don't do that, then you're not going to be, you're going to have 100 tools that don't talk to each other, and not enough people are in the space in our SOCs and our NOCs to even look at the information in those tools. So to do this in a coordinated manner, Sherry mentioned unifying the network. That's huge, right? That's a huge win. It's all about simplification and eliminating the dark spots in your network that you don't have visibility on anymore. A large part of that is part of this journey. So that's what our technical approaches that we're looking at. As you can tell, it's quite a bit. It's super complicated. And in finding the right mix of government folks to manage and maintain that pace is incredibly difficult. Our number one risk right now is having the right project managers, the right visibility, system engineers in place on the government side to keep the pace with the vendors and get these things going out.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing that with us. So we are almost to the end of our discussion, and I want to give each of you a minute at least to share with us what your biggest key takeaway from this discussion is. So what is it that you want to leave our audience with today? And we're just going to go around. We're going to share that. So let's start with James, please.
Sure. I'd say there's a couple of data points. As much as promise as Zero Trust has, Zero Trust also brings regulatory and compliance risk with it in and of itself. So I think we've hit a few times through this conversation on the cultural change management that needs to happen as Zero Trust is rolled out and the importance of getting that right. I think people that tend to take jobs as CISOs and CIOs often have technical and engineering backgrounds, and it doesn't necessarily come natural to us to embrace that part of the change management lead or need. And I think that's critically important. I think the second part is the need to automate has been brought up a number of different times. Technologies like OSCAL and OSCF have tremendous promise to be able to mitigate a lot of the compliance and risk associated with the rollout of Zero Trust. And as agencies are approaching those, I think it's critical to make the best use of them. Thanks.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And Sherry, let's hear from you next.
Yes, absolutely. So three critical areas, right? The one is transport agnostic. The network should be self-healing, self-reliable, and be able to cope on its own. The second one is data centricity, as I mentioned, right? Be able to figure out data from one place to another place, doesn't matter. But underlying all of that soft underbelly that we have to figure out is the cybersecurity has to be baked in to the entire process across all the 7 pillars of Zero Trust, so that everybody trusts the information, everybody has confidence in the artificial intelligence and machine learning, and there's also the signature management piece in terms of diversity of the signature footprint too. Over. Thank you.
Thank you. And Alan, let's hear from you next.
This is an absolutely great conversation. I'll say we all seem to have the same challenge, no matter, and it's not just specific to the federal government, it's industry. And so it is that modernization aspect of things that's necessary, creating that operational efficiency as we move forward, and then getting that full visibility of everything we need to see in the network, what's going on, knowing where the data is flowing. It's extremely important. And then as we able to mature those things and move that, then we can really get to true Zero Trust. But we can't do it we can't implement Zero Trust if it causes our own self-denial of service, right? If we sit there and do something, I think Coast Guard probably needs to put the things out around and protect and stuff, and they can't do that if Zero Trust is causing an inhibitor because of that. So we got to do it smartly. Thank you.
Thank you. Julian, what's your key takeaway?
Yeah, I think it's that we need to get better at unifying our environments, as has been said a number of times, right? We can leave everyone to solve these problems on their own, or we can help them out and come up with standardized architectures that can be reapplied and ease some of the burden and just get to better adoption, because now it's not each individual program managers or engineers problem to figure out how to secure the application and operate it in a manner that contributes to the larger goals of Zero Trust security across the department, but to do it in such a manner that we can ensure we can still interoperate with each other, because at the end of the day, DoD is an enterprise of different organizations that have the need to collaborate to each other, work with each other, especially on the front lines. And so we have to ensure that we do all of this in a cost-effective manner that takes into account that we can provide technology solutions to contain what our adversaries are able to do, but it doesn't make up for poor training or poor organizational hygiene. So we have to take a multifaceted approach and provide people both the technology and the organizational tools to deal with this rapid change.
Thank you. Jonathan, let's go to you next.
Yeah, so I heard a lot of great information today, and certainly, focusing on the data. The whole goal of this is protecting the data. How we go about doing that might be different in certain scenarios, but we need to be laser focused on the data being your prime asset that you're protecting. Whereas before, the prime asset was more or less the network. So that shift in focus is part of this education experience we want to move people towards. Is look over here, not over here, right? This is the new paradigm. I think I'll end my talk with a little bit of a challenge, and this is part of personal challenge of mine, is how do I use the bureaucracy itself to enable zero trust goals? I'm not trying to fight the bureaucracy. I'm not trying to create a whole separate paradigm. I want to be able to bake zero trust into our everyday lexicon, right? It should be part of all of our conversations that we have in the IT space. And that's a challenge I leave on the table, and I'm looking for any help in doing that from DoD, from DHS, or anybody else in between.
Awesome, thank you. And Roy, let's hear from you.
Well, I'm just kind of adding on to all this other great comments. I mean, I guess kind of three things. One, it's not hopeless. Two, it's a marathon, not a sprint. And third, there's no such thing as a one-size-fit-all turnkey solution when it comes to zero trust. I think those are probably good three things for me to apply to this conversation.
Thank you. Tony, let's go to you next.
So a lot of good things said. I appreciate it. I think I had some good takeaways. It is a journey. We have about 83,000 on our centralized naval identity system. We have about 500,000 that we've transitioned over to our flexibly cloud-enabled environment is built on zero trust principles. And we have 120,000 who we've got on just reach on our virtual desktop. So I think we're doing some good things. We're definitely on the leading edge when it comes down to DoD, but the journey is never done. So takeaways: focus on the data, prioritize identity and interoperability and simplification. So I appreciate what the Coast Guard said, because as we try to make all this work together, right? If we do it in silos, we're going to run into trouble. So it's also working with our partners here across the federal and the industry. Over.
Thank you. And Frank Indiviglio.
Sure. Again, thanks for the discussion today. I really appreciate it as well. And I don't know if I'm going to say too much differently from what the other folks have said, but I think, there's a lot of technical challenges that we have to work through here. We need to focus on data, as other people have said. I think there's a lot of upside in the automation and orchestration. The more we treat this as part of our systems rather than a separate function, I think that's going to improve the way we operate. And really, going back to what we were talking about before, I think this is a journey, right? We have to do it together, from the developers, the security experts, to the enterprise folks, to the administrators, right? This is something that will affect every user at every organization, and we have to educate and let them be part of the discussion throughout the whole process. So thank you.
Thank you. And Frank Catucci, you get the last word.
Fantastic. Yeah, I think there's a lot of commonalities here to take away. The biggest being that, we need to look at this from not only a technical perspective, but it seems that there's a lot of hurdles in the personnel and the resource and culture of the organizations to adopt a lot of these practices. So I think as long as there is an effort to facilitate the congruence between understanding where the technical and the people aspect is, that's going to be a key component. Beyond that, I think we've hit on the data piece enough, but I would also like to stress the the modernization, right? As technology and things modernize, we need to make sure that we're prepared to handle that modernization, and we need to be able to have the speed at which to adapt to that modernization. And that's on the defensive and offensive side. And last but not least, I would stress secure coding and inventory is going to always be a difficult piece. Hopefully, as DevOps matures across the board and is more widely accepted in the automation space, we can cut that down a bit. But at the end of the day, we're still going to face a lot of those critical pieces, especially in the inventory side.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We finished right on time. Snaps for everybody. So I want to thank our partners again at Invicti Security for making today happen. And for the folks at home, if you would like to receive your CPE credit for this event, please check yes that you answered all the polls. So thanks again, everyone. You'll see our next event is up on the screen here. You can go register for that, and we'll see you at the next one. Have a great rest of your week. Bye.
Thanks, Kirsten.
Thank you.